Hi everyone, it's Christy with CES Art Evolution Lab, and I am sitting here with a pile of fabric and some of my canvases to talk about how I use fabric on my canvases. This will actually be video 1 of 2. This particular video will cover the reasons why I use the fabric, and it will go over what to look for and consider when getting fabric at the store or getting used fabric. The second video is going to cover how I make my own custom fabrics. So let's get right into it. The reasons to paint on fabric are that it can decrease your prep time. It can also help you upgrade a cheap canvas. So for example, these canvases, you probably won't be able to see it on the screen. They look like any regular canvas. Someone gifted these to me and they're made out of very cheap plastic versus a real fabric canvas. They're not a lot of fun to paint on. It would take a lot of layers of gesso to get these at a level of smoothness that I am comfortable with. But of course, having something means that I feel compelled to use it. I just didn't want to throw it out. And the fabric offered me an easy way to upgrade the canvas quickly. The prep time is also reduced, whether you're using a cheap canvas or a more expensive canvas. Using the fabric just makes it really simple. Some canvases I'm finding I need about 7 to 10 layers of gesso before I get them to a smooth feeling that I am comfortable with when I'm painting. Using the fabric means I put the fabric on and then 1 to 2 layers of gel medium and I'm ready to go. A lot less drying time, a lot less prep time. So what are the things that you need to consider when you are looking for fabric? The first of these I'm going to mention would be color and pattern. So with color, and this is actually going to be something that is true with anything, any material that you're using, you need to try to choose materials that are close to what you are currently working with. Something that fits in with your style. And this canvas, I did not do that. I went into the store and I purchased this fabric because it was on sale and I wanted to try a silk blend. So the canvas, you can see the colors here. These are a lot of the brighter colors that I'm using at the moment. And the color that I chose of fabric is very pastel. I tried to kind of separate it from the background a little bit with the brighter yellow, and that did help me. But the realization came that because I didn't take into consideration the colors that I typically work with when I purchased this, that it wasn't quite what I was looking for. I'm also going to mention the pattern. So you can see there are floral prints here, and I'm fine with the floral print, or at least I thought I was, but when I positioned her on the canvas, it was obvious to me that there was little sections where it was almost like the flowers were growing out of her. That's what I felt like personally. And I was uncomfortable with that. That's another reason I layered down some of this yellow paint here. But because of those flowers sticking out of her, it really bothered me. I decided that I just don't know that I work well with this type of floral pattern. So keep in mind the pattern when you are choosing your fabrics. The other thing you want to consider, not just with the pattern, but with the size of the fabric. So this was a sample piece of fabric that I got. It's a cotton swatch used for quilting, but you can see how it's not covering all of the canvas here. And on this side, I have a lot of fabric. The reason for that is that with the pattern, you want to consider where you're placing the pattern. This is a bolder floral print, and I wanted these birds to show up in the finished image. So that meant placing the fabric in an uneven way on the canvas. So if you are shopping for fabric, there's basically 2 resources for purchased fabric. You're either going to purchase it directly from a fabric store, or you're going to purchase things like bed sheets or things like that on clearance. Actually, so I would say 3 resources. or you're going to find something used at a thrift store or a garage sale, or you're going to use something from your home that you find it's worn out and you can't repair it, but you can use scraps of it. So those are your main sources of fabric. And when you are using the fabric, you need to consider the size that you have for the canvas that you have available. So it happened that I have the smaller canvas and it ended up working out, but it does have the uneven sides. It could have been an issue for me if I purchased the fabric and didn't have a canvas that would fit this piece. So definitely consider the size of the fabric you have available compared with the pieces. You want to consider the colors that you're working with, the materials that you're going to use. Kind of go into looking at the fabric with a vision of, I see this fabric and I know I can use it on a project. Now, sort of cheating a little bit into the second video. I had started making my own fabric designs because of this piece here. When you look at the print, there was an artist who designed the flowers and the birds on this. These are not my artwork. What is nice about the fabric is that it does provide an instant background, and then you can focus on just painting the figure. And that offers you the ability to work more quickly, make more interesting dynamic pieces. But at the same time, when I look at this piece, I realize that I do not own these images. So let's say this were a fine art piece that I'm going to send to an art gallery, and the art gallery wants to put it on display and make art prints. The question then arises, because I did not design the background, can I legally make art prints of this design? So that is something you need to consider as well. When you're looking at the fabric, are you just going to make a one and done piece? Or are you looking to make something that you're going to make art prints off of? And if you're going to make art prints off of it, then you'll probably want to check out the second video. It'll probably take me about a week or so to make, but it will cover how I make my own custom fabric. You're also then, when you're looking at clothing, like used clothing as an option for scraps, you're not going to want to buy something that has a proprietary pattern or logo on it, because those would definitely be a one and done piece. For example, I saw an artist recently who was painting on designer scarves. So maybe he's looking to get some kind of deal with the scarf, the designer label company. But otherwise, I don't think that designer label would be thrilled if he would then turn around and make art prints with their logo all over the place. Some patterns that might work well, if you're concerned about that and you do want to make prints, you want to look for something like stripes. Those are generally not proprietary. Basic patterns like stars or animal prints, things that are not very, I guess you would say, unique, or something that could be someone's intellectual property that very obviously are someone's intellectual property. So now let's talk about the different fabrics you're going to find. Actually, since we have this one on the top, let's just look at this one. This is actually an old shirt that my husband had. He had ripped several spots in it, and it was not in a space where I could repair it anymore and send it or allow him to use it for work. I was not going to send him to work wearing a shirt with patches on it. So I went ahead and I cut it apart and used it as a background for this canvas. It worked really, really well for me. Some fabrics are going to have different thicknesses and textures, and that will vary the prep time. So you need to think about the thickness of the cloth. So for example, this cotton fabric only took a couple of layers of the gel medium. The silk-based fabric took very little gel medium. One layer and this thing was smooth like glass and super easy to paint on. This piece of cotton is a little bit thicker than the quilting cotton that was right here. The quality of the fabric is slightly different. And I noticed that after I prepped it, I probably should have used another layer of gel medium over the top, maybe two, because while it was somewhat smooth, there were a few areas of the the canvas, not the brush, a few areas of the canvas that had a little more tooth to them. And it was a little bit, I don't know if you can kind of hear it, but it is a little bit rougher, and it's not as completely smooth as the silk or as the cotton quilting fabric. So you'll want to consider the thickness of the material as well as the pattern. Other good things to find when you're thrifting are like bed sheets. I've used a lot of those for embroidery. Polyester materials are good. They're generally very smooth, and this would probably react very similar to the silk. I'm saying probably because I'm assuming I'm going to get a smooth, hard surface. So I definitely need to do a sample painting on this one. Some polyester fabrics are going to have a little more texture in them. So this one has these like stripes, these very thin, I don't know if you can kind of see the very subtle striped ribbed pattern. It's kind of like a stretchy material. These may have some texture that shows up when you're painting, so you just want to be aware of it. You may want to do a sample swatch of the fabric before you try it out. But I think this one's going to make an interesting painting, and I'm curious to do a sample on that one. So as far as like cotton fabrics, you'll have different thicknesses. So like the dress shirt is a little bit thicker than this shirt. And the opacity of the fabric is something you'll need to consider as well. So you can see my hands through this fabric. That means that whatever canvas I put it on top of, it's going to pick up the background canvas color, almost as though the canvas is going to act as an underpainting for that fabric. This could lead to some very interesting creative options for you, but at the same time, it could also make things a little more difficult for you, depending on if you're doing stitching or other things. So you want to consider that, the opacity. The other thing that could happen is if you have a very thin fabric, this is probably not too thin, but some silks will absorb the gel medium in such a way that they become almost clear or very translucent. So that is something to consider as well. It may be an effect you want, but if it's not something you want, you just need to be aware that that's what's going to happen with the fabric. This is another fabric that has texture to it. There's two layers here. We have the liner and we have the main top layer of this dress. Dresses with liners can work really well. It can give you basically two different types of fabric to work with for the cost of one piece. And I'm talking like if we're thrifting or using something that's donated, or you found it used at a sale or used from your own closet. You can use this as an underpainting on the canvas, but that means prepping two layers of fabric. First, prepping this one with the gel medium, and then prepping this layer second over the top. But again, this one has a lot of texture. There's these floral type prints in it. I don't think this pattern is proprietary, so this could definitely be used for a painting. Color-wise, it's not something I regularly would go with, but I might be able to do something with it. The other thing with this dress to consider are these rhinestones. So I just need to grab a sip of water here. If you have a dress or a shirt with any rhinestones, beads, or buttons, you need to consider whether or not you're going to just cut this away. Are there items you can cut off of there, like beads, for example, or buttons, and harvest off of there? Could you put something over the top and still paint? Yes, you definitely could. These are thicker, and so I'd probably have to use resin instead of the gel medium, and that means that's going to increase the prep time. But I could also just cut these away and use these for fabric collage. It's just something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that some materials are thirstier than other materials. So for example, I saw this, my neighbor had put it in the recycle room, and I instantly had an idea for a painting with it. I haven't done it yet. This material though, this flannel, is going to take additional prep time because it's very thick and some fabrics absorb more of the surface material than others. So I'm imagining I'm going to have quite a few extra layers of gel medium to use with this, and I'm going to sort of break that reason of the quicker prep time with this particular piece of fabric. We'll have to see. Denim might also be the same way. And again, in considering size, this particular piece here, I may have just certain sections that I can work with on smaller canvases because this pair of jeans is smaller. But I could use some of the scraps for other things like fabric collage. So again, just something to keep in mind when you're looking for fabric. Another thing to consider is how the fabric might interact with bleach or other items. And I mentioned bleach because there are some artists, or I guess you would say crafty people, who are very creatively using bleach pens to decorate clothing. And that could be something that you could do with your painting. You'd probably want to do it before you put it on the canvas. So you would treat it with the bleach pens, draw on it, put it through the wash, and then be able to utilize that on your canvas with an interesting, ready-to-go background. And that reminds me of one more thing to mention. When you are getting fabric, especially used fabric, you probably want to run it through the wash at least once before using it on your painting. And the reason you want to do that is you don't know how it was washed or treated before it came to you. And you don't know what items, like something in it might affect or blend or do something odd with any of the paints or inks that you're working with. So go ahead and run it through the wash one time before using it on your canvas. So coming up then next, I'm going to have a video about how I make my own custom fabrics. And then I will probably have some subsequent videos where I use these fabrics that I have shown you today on some quick paintings. And that will allow me to show you how I prep the canvas and what tools that I use for those. So stay tuned for the channel. I can't speak today. Stay tuned to the channel for that. Anyway, it's coming into the weekend, and I think it's time for you to also go out and create. Thank you for listening.